Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the chapter 27 story from the Ecce textbook and translate it together. Before we dive into it though, I do want to say, like I always tell you at these videos, you want to make sure that you have the vocab under control first. There's not a ton of new vocab words in this story. This story is about them going to the circus. It's really not anything new in terms of vocab, but it's a very grammar dense chapter. So you want to make sure that you're reading through everything, trying to take it one piece at a time. I personally don't love the way Ecce's laid this out by putting so much grammar into one chapter. So usually in class, we'll break it apart into different pieces. But if you are following along the traditional pace of and sequence of Ecce Romani, you're probably going to run into this chapter with all its pronouns and adjectives. There's just a lot going on. So I would highly recommend that you take some time and take them all one piece at a time, work your way through. Instead of doing an overview of the grammar like I normally do, I'm just going to direct you to my grammar video. It's a lot easier to do because there's just too much to cover and review here. So I think that would be your best bet. But once you have the grammar under control, or as good as you possibly feel that you can do it, make sure that you're reading this story out loud. Again, find a partner, find someone you can work with, read this story to them so you can practice your pronunciation, and then have them read it back to you so you can practice your listening skills. You never want to shut off those two means of learning because you'd be surprised how much you absorb and learn just by hearing the Latin, and that's something that we don't often do a lot when we learn Latin. So you want to make sure that you are emphasizing it. It really will help. So this is what I was referring to with the 27 grammar. It's just the pronoun bonanza chapter. They're all over the place. You have personal pronouns like I, you, he, she, it, we, you, all, and they. You have reflexive pronouns, so myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves, which are referring back to the subject, right? And then you have possessive adjectives on top of everything else. So how do we say my, yours, its, ours, and so on? So there's just a lot here. Each one of these could probably be their own chapter with a bunch of practice just to help you through. But instead, they all land in one chapter in Ecce Romani. It's sort of like a grammar dump before book one ends. And they also have the dative with special intransitive verbs just to add a little extra flair too. So there's a ton going on here, and it's more than you can do in just like one sitting. So again, I won't do it here. I would highly emphasize that you go take a look at my grammar video if you want on YouTube. I've linked it here in the video. Feel free to look it through, or just dive into Ecce Romani and try to take it apart one piece at a time. The thing here though is that they give you a lot of grammar without a lot of practice, which is never ideal. So some of these things that you're learning, you're not going to see a ton of in the story in chapter 27. But you will see them as you move forward in the Ecce stories, from here on. So it's worth doing. You want to definitely dive into it. It's just more than we could possibly do here. So just make sure that you've got it under control and you feel comfortable with it. Once you hit that point, you'll be ready to dive into the actual story, which is what we'll do now. So the story starts, and remember, this is sort of in narration form. You're getting a conversation between the different family members. So on the left-hand side, when you see Marcus and Sextus, that's who's talking here, because there is sort of a narrative flow to the story. So Marcus starts by saying, Sexte, Sexte, hodie nobis licet ad ludos circenses ire. So Marcus says, Sextus, Sextus, right? He's calling him by name. That's why it's orange here. It's vocative. So he says, today, licet nobis, it is permitted, licet, we've seen that before. Remember, we've said that when you see that impersonal licet, it's going with a dative. It's permitted for somebody to do something. In this case, the dative is nobis. It's permitted for us. To do what? We need an infinitive. It's ire, to go. Ad ludos circenses means to the circus games. It's accusative because you're going towards or to them, right? So he says today it's allowed or it's permitted for us to go to the circus games, right? They've been wanting to do this the whole time, and now they're actually going. You have Euclides, me et te et Corneliam ad circum ducet. So the subject here is Euclides, right? Euclides, ducet. This is the verb duco ducere, which means to lead. It's a third declension verb, third conjugation verb. So when you see the E in front of the T, it means it's future tense. Remember, the A and 5 E's kind of give it away as being future. So he's saying Euclides will lead, and then you need direct objects. Who is Euclides going to lead? Me and you and Cornelia, right? So all the children. Ad circum, to the circus. So he's saying Euclides is going to lead all of us to the circus today. Then Sextus responds. He says, Ludos circenses amo, sed nonne circus clausus erit. So he's saying, I like, amo, it's present tense, I like or I love the circus games, meaning the chariot races, right? He says, but surely, said nonne, right? Surely the circus will be. Erit is future tense of the verb to be. So he says, surely the circus will be closed. And again, this is sort of a reference to the day before when they were walking around with Uncle Titus and the Circus Maximus was silent and it was closed. So he's saying, won't it be closed? And the answer is no, it's going to be open today. So it starts by kind of being reminiscent of what we've seen in the previous chapters in terms of the. So now Marcus responds. He says, minime, no. Circus non erit clausus, nam hodie cives omnes feriati sunt. So he says the circus will not be, non erit, it will not be closed because nam, today, all the citizens, there's your subject, cives omnes, and then they give you this verb, feriati sunt. It means they will be celebrating a holiday is basically what it means. So he's saying everyone's going to be, taking the day off, so the circus is going to be open, okay? Feriati sunt is a form that you're going to see later on. I'll leave it alone for now. Just treat it as a vocab word, and you'll understand kind of what's happening here later on in a few chapters. So it's kind of an odd choice for the story to use this verb, but we can still translate it. They're celebrating a holiday. Then you have viae erunt pleni hominum. So viae, the roads, there's your subject. They will be errant. They will be full, pleni hominum. It's genitive plural of people, right? Again, that is the third declension genitive plural ending. So he says the streets or the roads will be full of people. Viri, mulieres, liberi, circum celerime petent. So he says men, viri, mulieres, women, and liberi, children, right? Those are your three subjects, men, women, and children. Celerime means very quickly or the most quickly. Petent, again, is future tense. Petere means to look for or to seek. The ent makes it future tense because it's a third conjugation verb. So it's saying men, women, and children will look for or will seek out the circus, there's your direct object, the circus maximus, very quickly. So everyone's going to be rushing to the circus, is what Marcus is saying. Then Sextus says, sed no nunc discedimus, ego sum iam paratus. So he says, but why, said Cur, why non discedimus? Why are we not leaving, right? Discedere means to depart, right? So he says, why are we not departing nunc, now? Right? Discedimus is just present tense here. He says, why aren't we now leaving? Ego sum paratus. I am ready. Paratus. Iam means already here. So he says, you could say now or already. Already probably works best. He says, I'm already, ready to go, prepared. And again, this makes sense because Sextus has been excited for the circus games this whole time, right? That's what he's been wanting to do. Marcus responds and says, simula Cornelia e somno surrexerit statum ibimus. So he says, as soon as simula Cornelia surrexerit, it's future perfect tense. You can tell because surrex with the X gives it away as being the third part of the verb. Erit is the future tense form of esse. So this is the future perfect tense. So he's saying as soon as Cornelia will have gotten up, right, risen up, surgo, a somno, from sleep. So as soon as Cornelia will have gotten up from sleep, right, as soon as she will have woken up is kind of the idea, immediately, statum ibimus, future tense, we will go. Again, you use these tenses when you have two things happening in the future and you're trying to sequence them out. One needs to happen before the other. First is future perfect. Cornelia needs to get up. Then you have the future tense, we will go. Right, so he's saying as soon as she will have gotten up, we will go. Then we continue. Euclides chimes in. He says, agite, iam tandem ad circum ire tempus est. Right, and I believe in the story there's a little bit of English explaining the background. The kids get ready, Cornelia gets up, all that stuff. Then Euclides says, come on, agite, it's a plural command, right? Let's go, he's saying. Iam tandem ad circum ire tempus est. It is time, tempus est, right? Ire, to go. Tandem means finally, and iam means now. So you could almost say now it is time to finally go ad circum, to the circus. And he's saying, or he's acknowledging that they've wanted to do this for a long time. He's saying, finally, it's time to go. Then he says, estis ne parati pueri, est ne parata Cornelia. So he's talking to both of them. Pueri and Cornelia are both vocative because he's calling them by name. Estis means you are, right? But since it's a question, he's saying, are you, parati, prepared boys? Okay, parati is plural and it's nominative because it's referring to the boys. So he's saying, are you, right, two boys, are you prepared, boys? Then he says, are you prepared, Cornelia? And notice how parata is feminine singular because he's only talking to Cornelia here. Then Euclides says, and I believe, again, there's a sidebar where they head off to the circus. You have Yam a circo non procul absumus. So he says, now we are not far away. Non procul. Procul means sort of far away. Absumus, we are not far away. A circo, from the circus. Again, it's ablative because you have that preposition a or ab, which always takes the ablative, right? Away from. So we're not far away from the circus. And he says, non strepitum auditus. So surely you all hear, auditus, right? You all hear the strepitum, the noise. He says, ecce omnes ad circum festinat. He says, look, everyone is hurrying, festinat, to the circus, right? So he's saying there's a ton of noise, everyone is rushing to get there. We have brevi tempore, nos ipsi intrabamus. So in a short time, brevi tempore, nos ipsi. Nos ipsi means we ourselves, right? We ourselves, it's this intensifier, ipsi. So we ourselves, intrabamus, it's future tense. You can tell by the bi in the middle. It means we will enter. So he's saying everyone's running to the circus, right? Everyone's hurrying, and Euclides says soon, or in a short time, we ourselves will enter, right? So he's saying they're getting close, and you can hear all the noise of the 100,000 plus people in the circus. Then Cornelia chimes in for the first time, and she says, quam ingens est turba hominum. So quam here means how, right? When you're using quam with an exclamation point, it's this exclamatory. You're saying how is something, right? In this case, it's how ingens, how huge or how great or huge is the turba, the crowd. Hominum is genitive plural, of people. So she's commenting and saying, wow, look how huge this crowd is. Literally, she says, how huge is the crowd of people? Totus circus est plena spectatorum. So she says the entire circus, circus maximus, totus circus, is full, plenus. And we've seen this before. When you use the word full, right, that adjective, you always are using a genitive after it, right, full of something. So it's plena spectatorum, full of spectators. Spectatorum, right, is that genitive plural, third declension noun. Spectator, right, is the noun. The ending gives it away as being genitive plural. So she's saying it's full of spectators. Then Euclides says, ita vero, semper multi spectatores in circo sunt. He considemus, right? So he asks a question, but before he does that, he says, ita vero, yes, right? Truly, yes. He says, always multi spectatores, many spectators, there's your plural subject, are in the circus. You could almost say there are many spectators in the circus, right? The Circus Maximus, we'll talk about this at the end, but it's a massive racetrack that could hold a ton of people. So Euclides is saying, yeah, there's always a lot of people here. Then he says, hic considemus, right? He's saying here, hic considemus. Will we sit here, right? He's basically saying, should we sit here, right? Is really what he's getting at. But it's the verb to sit down. So he's saying, are we gonna sit here? And he's asked them, this is a good spot, basically. Marcus says, minime, no, right? Prope curriculum sedere necesse est, quod ibi omnia videre poterimus. So Marcus is the one who says no, right? He says, it is necessary, necesse est, sedere, it's necessary to sit, prope curriculum, near the racetrack, meaning close to the action. So Euclides is very far back, right? He's like, oh, let's sit in the nosebleeds, this will be good. And Marcus is like, no, we got to get close to the racetrack. Right? Why? Quote, because ibi, meaning there, close to the track, poterimus, we will be able, right? It's the future tense form of posse. We will be able, videre, to see. It's a complementary infinitive. We'll be able to see omnia, everything. Euclides then comes in and says, prope curriculum sedere periculosum est. So, but to sit, right? Sedere, he's saying is periculosum. It's dangerous to sit, right? Prope curriculum, near the racetrack. So Euclides is always being cautious and checking the boys. He says it's dangerous to sit near the racetrack, right? And if you study the chariot races, it's true. There might be a crash. There's things flying everywhere. It could be very dangerous to get close to the action. So he says, pater vester multa de periculo dixit. So your father, right? Here's that possessive adjective vester, your father, meaning all of yours, father, referring to Cornelius, right? Gaius. He says, your father said, dixit is perfect tense. You can tell by the X in the middle of it. So he says, your father said multa. Multa is an adjective, but it doesn't have a noun going with it. It's a neuter plural adjective. When you have this is called the substantive. Again, when you have an adjective that doesn't have a noun near it, it's usually standing by itself in place of a noun. So you really can translate this many things because it's neuter. So he's saying your father said many things de periculo, about the danger, right? It's ablative because de goes with ablative nouns. So he's saying your father told us, right? It's really dangerous to be here. Literally, he says your father said many things about the danger. Marcus says, nihil periculi est, nam titus patrus meus cum amicis prope curriculum sedere sole. So he says, literally, there is nothing of danger. This is that partitive genitive we've been seeing the past few chapters. You could better translate it as there is no danger, right? So he says, it's not dangerous. There's no danger. And he says, because, or for, my uncle, Patrus Meus, my uncle Titus, solet, is accustomed to, or usually, you could say, he usually sits, solet sedere, or is accustomed to sitting, cum amicis, with his friends, ablative, right? Ablative plural, with his friends, prope curriculum, near the racetrack. So Marcus is counter is saying, yeah, Dad said it's dangerous, but my Uncle Titus sits here all the time. We're going to be fine. Then Sextus chimes in. He says, Ecce, Caesar ipse jam surrexit, signum dare para, ego rusatis favebo. So Sextus says, look, right, Caesar himself, Caesar ipse, there's that intensifier again, Caesar himself now surrexit, got up. Right, so Caesar already got up, or now got up, you could say. Right, surrexit is perfect tense. Again, you can tell by the X in the middle of it. It's from the third principal part of surgo, surgere. So he says Caesar himself already got up. Para, he is preparing, present tense, because again, he already got up. He's preparing to give dare, the signum, the signal, the sign. Right. So again, what we think this is about is the idea of dropping the mappa, the napkin. It's sort of like waving a flag in a race, in a modern race. They would give some sign from the emperor to say, yeah, now it's time to start the race. So Sextus is seeing this and saying, look, it's almost time, right? He's preparing to give the signal. Then he says, ego, I, favebo, I will give favor to, is kind of what that verb means. And again, it's future tense because it's bo, right? Gives it away. And it goes with a dative because, again, you give favor to something. Now, what does that mean? It really means he's going to cheer for them, right? So literally give favor to, but in a more kind of easier way to understand, he's saying, I will cheer for is kind of the idea. The Rusatis are the Reds, right? It's one of the charioteer groups. And again, you can do some research and we'll talk at the end about this, but the chariot racing teams wore different colors to signify kind of what team they were about. So he says the Rusatis, the Reds, I'm going to, prefer them, right? Marcus says, ego albatis, right? I, favebo, is implied here. I will give favor to. The whites, the albatis. Cornelius says, ego venetis, right? The greens. They're saying they're all picking different colors, basically, of who they're going to cheer for, which is really the idea. Then Marcus says, ecce mappa signum est. So there's the napkin. Again, it's the idea of like the flag or the napkin. You drop the napkin and the race starts. So he says, look, the mappa, it is the signum, the sign, right? It's the signal. Then Cornelia, they're watching now. Cornelia says, quam ferociter equos verberan illi aurigae. So the subject is illi aurigae. Now, if this looks a little weird, it should catch you as being a little odd. It's because aurigae, charioteers, right? Or an auriga, one charioteer. It's one of the few first declension nouns that are masculine. So even though it's using that first declension ending, right? It is a masculine noun, which is why the adjective going with it, the demonstrative is illi and not illi. So at first it seems a little weird. You're like, wait, why isn't there an AE on illi? That's the reason why it is a masculine noun. So Cornelius says, how fiercely, ferociter, right? How fiercely those charioteers, again, illi, it's the pointing word for something that's not close to you, right? If it were close, she'd say he, aurigae, but she says illi, those, right? She's pointing at something far away. So how fiercely those charioteers, verberan, are beating or are hitting the equos, the horses, right? So she's saying, look how they're kind of driving them forward. Then she says, quam celeriter equos agunt. So again, how quickly they are driving agunt, the equos, the horses. So she's saying they're going really fast and they're really kind of fiercely hitting the horses with the stick to make them go. Quam temerarii sunt, right? How fearless they are. Right, or how reckless they are, you could say, temerari, right? So she's saying these aurigae are really, bold and reckless people for doing this. And she asks a question, nonne mortem timent. So surely they fear death, right? Death is the direct object. Timent, timere is a second conjugation verb. So timent is just present tense. So she turns, she's like, surely they fear death, right? It's sort of a rhetorical question. She's like, aren't they afraid they're going to die going so fast? Then Sextus chimes in. He says, ecce rusatus meus certe victor eret, nam equos magna arte aget. So he says, look, my red, right, it's singular, meaning my red driver, my red charioteer, the charioteer on the red team, certainly will be, eret is future tense of esse, he will be the victor, the winner. Because, or for, nam, right? Because he is driving, agit, again, it's present tense, right? It's a third conjugation verb, ago, agere. There's no ba or an e or an a in front of the ending, so it's just present tense. He's saying he is driving the equos, the horses, magna arte. Here's your ablative. It's describing how he's doing it. He's kind of driving them on with great skill. So Sextus is saying that's a really skilled driver, right? My guy's definitely going to be the winner because look how well he can drive the chariot and make the horses go. Then it continues with Marcus saying, "O me misram, auriga meus equos de verte." So he says, "Oh, poor me, miserable me, right? My charioteer, auriga meos, right? My charioteer," and again, meos is masculine because auriga is masculine, even though it's first declension. So he says, "My charioteer turned, right? Kind of diverted the horses, meaning he turned. Kawe metam, beware the turning post." The meta is the post, that turning post in the middle of the race. So this is the most dangerous part of the chariot race. You have to do a very sharp turn with your horses. So it's usually where the crashes happen, right? So he's saying my guy is turning the horses. So he's afraid as he's making that turn, what'll happen? He says, beware the turning post. Kawe metam, kawe metam. Then he says, esne semisomnus fatue. So esne means are you. Semisomnus means half asleep. So he says, are you half asleep, fatue? Stupid, right? Again, the e there is vocative. He's calling the charioteer stupid. He says, hey, you, stupid, are you half asleep? He says, kermetam non vitawisti, right? So he says, why didn't you avoid? It's perfect tense, right? Isti. So, and vitari means to avoid. He says, why did you not avoid the turning post, right? So he says, what are you doing? Why are you driving so badly is really what he's getting at. Cornelius says, ahiu, ille auriga kekide, humiyaket. Esne mortuus. So Cornelius says, alas, or oh no, that charioteer, right? Again, the demonstrative ille means you're pointing at something far away. That charioteer, it, he fell, perfect tense. He is lying on the ground, humi, right? He's lying on the ground. Esne mortuus, is he dead, right? So Cornelius is afraid that this charioteer who didn't avoid the turning post crashed and is now kind of dead on the ground, right? We had a crash. Sextus says, minime, ecce, animum recuperavit, jam surge. So Sextus says, no, right? He's not dead. Look, recuperavit is perfect tense. He regained his animum, his senses, right? His mind. He regained his senses. Jam surge. Now he is getting up. So luckily, this guy is not dead. And Sextus says, no, he's not dead. Look, he kind of recovered his senses. He came back to life, basically, and he's getting up. He's fine. Cornelius says, audivistine clamores horum spectatorum. So audivisti means did you hear, right? It's a question. It's perfect tense. So she's saying, did you hear the clamores, the shouts? Horum spectatorum is genitive, right? It's another demonstrative horum, but it's referring to something close to you. So it's not those, it's these. And since it's genitive, it's of these. So she's saying, did you hear the shouts of these spectators, right? The idea is they're really loud. She's like, wow, can you believe it? Did you hear these shouts? She says, magna voce nomina aurigarum et equorum semper clamant. So she's saying in a loud voice, ablative, right? How did they shout? They shouted in a loud voice or with a loud voice. Semper clamant. They are always shouting the nomina. There's our direct object, right? The egg is neuter. It could technically be nominative or accusative, but you're not saying the name shouted. You're saying they shouted the names. It's the direct object. So she's saying always they shout the names in a loud voice, the names of the charioteers and of the horses. Aurigarum et equorum are both genitive plural. So the names belonging to the charioteers and the horses, right? They're always shouting. And Cornelius says, undique ingens est strepitus. So on all sides is the loud, or there is the ingens strepitus, the loud noise, right? There's all this commotion and loud noise on all sides, all over the place, right? It's just echoing is kind of her idea. Tantum strepitum ego numquam audivi. So Cornelius says, I never heard. Audivi is perfect tense, right? I have never heard. Ego is just your subject. Tantum strepitum, such a noise, right? I've never heard anything like it, right? It's her first time in the circus. Marcus says, Rusati vicerum, said mox etiam albati vincent. So Marcus says the Reds won. Vicerum is perfect tense. So the red team, the Reds won, but soon, said Mokes, he says the Albati, right? The Whites, that's the team he was cheering for. The Whites will win. Vincent is future tense. The E gives it away, right? Winko, winkere, it's future tense. So he's saying, soon the Whites will also win, right? He says, so don't worry about it. We lost this one, but the white team's going to win soon, is kind of his idea. Then Euclides says, hoc fortasse accidet, sed Caligula ipse ut dicot, prasinos amabat, rather. So Euclides says, this might, hoc means this, right? Perhaps this will happen, accidet, Fortasse means perhaps. He says, perhaps this will happen, meaning the whites will win. But Caligula himself, ut dicot means as it said, right? Or as they say, you could almost translate it as just a vocab word. So he says Caligula himself, the Roman emperor, right? As they say. Amabat, he was liking, or he was kind of rooting for, loving the prasinos, the greens, right? So he says, yeah, that might happen, but the emperor supposedly likes the green. So now we continue. And it says Euclides, right? Euclides says, Jam sero est. And I believe before this, they put a little direction that they watch a few more races, if I remember right. So they watch a few more races, and Euclides says, Jam sero est. Now it is late. Nunc domum redibimus. So he's saying, now we will, right? Bimus, bi makes it future tense. It's from redire. We will return home, right? So he says, now it's time to go, right? It's late. Now we will return home. Sextus says, nondum tempus est domum radire. He says, not yet, nondum. It's not yet time, tempus, to return home. Look, ecce, right? Aurigae habenas sumpserunt et signum expectant. So he says, look, the charioteers, right? The aurigae sumpserunt, they picked up, right? Or grabbed, you can almost say, but they picked up the habenas, the reins, and they are waiting, expectant, present tense, they are waiting for the signal, right? So he's saying another race is about to start, is what Sextus is saying. He's like, we can't leave now. They're about to do another race. Euclides says, nisi mox discedemus, turbam ingentem vitare non poterimus, agite domum. So Euclides says, unless we will leave discedemus soon, mox, unless we will leave soon, he says, non poterimus, we will not be able, vitare, to avoid the turbam ingentem, the huge crowd. So he says, agite, come on, let's go, right? It's that plural command. Let's go home, right? Homeward. Euclides is kind of that person who goes to a sporting event and wants to leave early, right? Catch the crowd, or leave before the crowd. That's what he's getting at. But he does have a point. I mean, there's 100,000 people here. I guess, if you're thinking logistically, there is a good chance you get stuck in a massive crowd. And he doesn't want to do that with the children, right? He thinks it's dangerous anyway. So he's saying, we have to go. It's time to leave. And that's how the story ends, okay? So again, this story, it's fun. It's a good topic. The chariot races, by the way, I'd highly encourage you to take a look at the Circus Maximus. This is an image of it, of where it was located in the city of Rome. So what you're looking at here, the circus is the giant racetrack. To the right of it in this picture would have been the Palatine Hill where the imperial palace was. And if you keep going further to the right, you'll see the Colosseum. So the Circus Maximus is in a really prominent position in ancient Rome, and it's connected to the imperial palace. So it shows you the connection between the games and the chariot races and how important they were for Roman culture and for the emperor to put on as a sign of his own authority and power and his gift to the people, right? There's a lot happening here. I'd highly, highly encourage you to look through it and do some research on the Circus Maximus. But you can see by the shape of the racetrack itself in this picture, if you look at the top of the track, right at the top of the image, that's where you would have the starting stalls, right? Where all the horses leave, they'd run out and go around the track, usually somewhere around 7 times, I think is about how far they go. But you can see how sharp of a turn it is around the metae, the turning posts. So again, it's worth looking into and doing some research on. And the charioteers themselves, these are images of charioteers, and you can see the colors they're wearing, the greens, the blues, the reds, the whites. These are the famous racing teams in Rome. I'd highly encourage you to do some research. There's a lot of comparisons between the chariot races and modern sporting events today that are really worth looking into and seeing, how do they build these structures that supported so many people, and what did they do with crowd control and things like that. Definitely worth your time. But in terms of the story, this is why this chapter is a little tricky. There's some reference to the grammar, the pronouns and all that stuff, just not enough to really make you feel comfortable with it. So don't go crazy with this chapter's grammar. Try to work your way through. It'll show up more as you go through the rest of the Ecce story. But for now, just make sure you have a good grasp of it. And hopefully, going through that translation made sense. Hopefully it was a more interesting story with the chariot races. If you get stuck and there's anything you're not sure of, feel free to just put a comment on this video. I'll help you however I can. But feel free to go back, watch it, reread it, and just make sure that you feel really comfortable. At this point, you're done with the Ecce 1 book, so you've made it through the first part of Ecce, and you're getting ready to transition into Ecce 2. So good luck. If you happen to be following a model where you do the book in a year, you might be at the end of your time and transitioning to another grade. So either way, good luck. Hopefully by now you're feeling pretty confident, and you should be proud that you've made it through 27 chapters of the Ecce Romani story. You've got a lot of Latin under your belt. So hopefully you're feeling pretty good. And as we move forward into Ecce 2, we'll keep making more videos, but just keep after it, keep practicing, and hopefully you're feeling more and more confident as we go.